let's directly jump into it. We will create a new cost center. This is done via transaction code KS01. As you can see over here, the controlling area is in my case grayed out. This is because I already set the controlling area via transaction code OKKS. However, we can also set the controlling area over here via more, extras, set controlling area. Okay, so as you can imagine, cost centers exist within a controlling area. This is why we need to insert the controlling area first. The cost center ID, this can be up to 10 digits and alphanumeric. Most likely it's either numeric or a combination of letters and numbers. In my example, it is alphanumeric. Then we have the validity period. So basically I will normally set this to the beginning of the year, like that for instance, and with an unlimited end date. You can see we can also create cost centers from reference, meaning that if we have cost centers already existing in the system and the new cost center should inherit some of the values for the fields or the parameters to be precise, then we would create here from reference. However, in our example, we create from scratch, and now I can press enter all over here on master data. And you can see a new screen. First of all, we have the metadata. This is from the initial screen. And then we have separate tabs over here. And we will go through them from left to right. So first of all, we have the basic data. Here we can insert a name for the cost center. Let's say cost center test, for instance. And a description. This is a test cost center. And by the way, the name is 20 characters, really important. The description is 40 characters. However, for the description, there's also this long text button where we can create even more text if needed. Then we have the basic data. First of all, it says user responsible. This is the system user responsible for this cost center. So here as you can see, there's also the search help available. So this is for all these SAP system users. So the users existing in transaction SU03. But as you can see, this is not mandatory. Then we have here mandatory field person responsible. For instance, John Doe. However, it is mandatory, even though it's a free text field, because it could be that the person responsible for this cost center does not have an SAP account. This was the initial thought of SAP behind the person responsible. Then we have the department, also free text field. We don't need to fill it right now. And then we have the cost center category. This is quite important. As you can see, it's also mandatory. Let me actually open the search help over here. As you can see, we have different cost center categories. Basically, this is used for a linkage between the cost center and the so-called activity types, which is basically another set of master data, which we are going to talk about in a separate session. Let's now just set administration, for instance, and that's it. Then we have the hierarchy area. So basically, we are forced to assign our cost center to the standard hierarchy. The hierarchy is nothing else than, as the name already suggests, a hierarchy of different cost centers, which can also be subdivided by groups within the standard hierarchy. So in my case, hierarchy is called D02. Then we have the company code. So a cost center is always created with respect to a company code. This is particularly important because in the end, we could have multiple company codes assigned to one of our controlling areas, as the one over here. However, the cost center ID itself, so this number over here, can only be used once in the controlling area. So meaning that, for instance, we have one cost center which exists in the company code A and should also exist in the company code B. Then the name still needs to deviate in company code B from the name given in company code A. Even though it's the same, or the cost center has the same functionality, we need to think about a clever way to distinguish or to only use the alphanumeric key of a cost center once in the controlling area. Nevertheless, going on, we have here the business area. So this is also not mandatory, as you can see. However, In certain companies, this is used as another criteria to distinguish. As the business area is actually mandatory in my system, let me just fill it. You can see the functional area has been grayed out. This is because the functional area will only be enabled if we have the cost of sales accounting approach active in the system to display and also calculate the profit and loss statement. And then we have the currency. So the currency will be the currency of the company code. If profit center accounting is enabled, we would also assign here a profit center. Then we have the next button called Control. Over here, you can see the checkbox called Record Quantity. Let me explain this in an easy way. So here we say whether we want quantities to be posted with this cost center. The quantity could be something like the cubic meters on the water bill, for instance. And this would provide further important data for our controlling. We could, for instance, then analyze the additional costs compared to the previous year and also find out which part of the cost increase would be due to a change in the purchasing price and which part is due to a change in the quantities consumed, for instance. Those quantities also arise on cost centers through consumption postings from the materials management and also through the allocation of activity quantities between different cost centers. And since quantities like kilograms, hours, pieces, kilowatt hours and so on are also always analyzed in controlling parallel to the values, so parallel to currencies, the checkbox here should be checked indeed. Then we have a lot of log parameters, meaning that if we tick one of those, then for instance, posting primary cost with this cost center would be prohibited. And the same counts for secondary costs and also for revenues. Even though revenues we don't post for cost centers as they are called cost centers, we can only post statistical revenues to cost centers. Then you can see a button over here called Commitment Update. And this is used when we want certain values to be displayed in our financial system, even before we receive an invoice. For instance, we want the values on the cost center to be displayed when procuring a material, so when saving a purchase order already. And this is done by the Commitment Update button over here. Then you can see we have some other tabs over here, templates. This is a more advanced topic for formula planning. And then we have address, communication, and history data. So address and communication data is just 3 text fields, and history would be all the changes being made to the cost center itself. So now it's time to actually save the cost center over here. I click on the Save button and the cost center has been created. Let's now assume that we want to change certain values for this cost center. So therefore we navigate to More, Cost Center, Change. Then for this particular cost center we click Enter. And now let's assume that we want to change both, for instance, the description. By the way, description and name we can always change. And also some more important parameters like the cost center category. This we can only change for a new fiscal year when no values have been posted to this cost center yet, which counts for actual values and also for planned values for sure. Let's change those 2 fields here. We click on More, Edit, Analysis Period. Here you can see the analysis period we already entered. So this is our cost center and we click now on Other Period. New validity date, let's say new fiscal year. Choose. And then we can adjust the settings. This is a new description. And let's say the category we will change to the material category. And then save. Now go again to More, Cost Center, Display. And if we now hit Enter, the system will prompt us to a little screen where we can select what information we want to be displayed depending on the validity period. So for instance, if I click on this one over here, this was the initial one we created, we can see the description as such and the cost center category set to W. But if we go to the other one, we will see the new description and the new cost center category.